Welcome, everybody, back to another exciting show of the About That Wallet podcast. I'm your host, Anthony, and here at the About That Wallet podcast, we are here working on helping you build stronger financial behaviors. I have a reoccurring guest, Eunicia Peret. I want to say thank you so much for coming back on the show. How are you doing today, Eunicia?
I'm doing great, Anthony. It is such a pleasure to be here with you and your listeners, and I'm looking forward to an amazing time during the time that we have together.
Awesome. So, Eunicia, today we actually going to start talking about fear and how it actually impacts your finances. So, for those of the people who are new to listening to the show, can you just give them a quick, brief background of your company, what it's all about, and how you can actually help them?
Absolutely. So I'm looking forward to the conversation on fear. But in the meantime, Eunicia Peret here. I am the CEO and founder of the Empowered Financial Planner. And the whole idea behind the Empowered Financial Planner, similarly to what you're doing with your clients, helping them build stronger financial behaviors, what we do is we take a very consultative, truly consultative approach to helping our clients think holistically when it comes to their taxes, when it comes to financial planning, and when it comes to looking forward to figuring out what it is that we can and should be doing to maximize their retirement income, so that instead of living on what we think we're going to live off of, to see how we might be able to maximize that to where we can actually live off of it as if it was worth multi-millions of dollars. And so we bring all of that together and using our customized approach. And the reason for that and the background to that, it comes with my personal background in strategy consulting. So because I've been there, I'm able to see a lot of the black angles and dark angles that a lot of individuals don't see. And that's what we do for our clients.
Wow. So you already have everything in house, which is amazing. So when it comes to fear, especially taxes, is such a fearful thing because a lot of us, we leave a lot of money on the table, which we talked about in our last episode. And I like how we can come back now and talk about the fear when it comes to finances. A lot of people are afraid to even look at their finances in the first place. So starting off with the definition of fear, which is an unpleasant emotion caused by the belief that someone or something is dangerous, likely to cause pain or a threat. Now, just with that definition of fear, how have you helped people with their fear in their finances?
Well, what I will tell you is it's your definition. The definition that you shared on fear is a very, very powerful one because it's that unpleasant emotion, I think, is not just there, but it's really what's causing it. That is the bigger problem. And this is one of those situations where we mustn't just look at we're afraid, but rather being open to identifying those things that are causing the fear. I'll give you a perfect example that speaks very true to so many individuals, especially when it comes to money. Obviously, everything that we do revolves around money, everything that we do at Empower Financial Planner. And so this particular client, it was a husband and wife, and they had worked with multiple financial experts in the past. Some of the strategies that were implemented on their behalf were not necessarily in alignment with their goals. And because of that, when they experienced adversity, when they experienced losses, market turbulence, etc., they were so shaken to the core that they ended up kind of retracting on the inside and saying, I can't do it. And no matter what, the goals were there, they knew what they wanted, but they were so afraid of making any moves with their money. They met now another definition, the definition of being paralyzed. And the husband was a lot more open-minded. He's an engineer, very bright individual, works for a technology company as a partner. And he basically said, like, I'm going to geek out on this thing. And we were able to have some very, very strategic conversation. But the wife, who was in the world of mathematics, was so cornering herself in this fear corner where I've been there, I've done that. I've heard about that. I've heard of other people doing that. I think I am too old. I think I don't have enough time. I think my husband is going to die when he's in his 80s. Can you see where this is going?
Yep.
It was the fear that was enabled by the prior experiences and also preconceived notions that should not even be there. Why are we talking about a 60-year-old and telling him that he's going to die in his 80s? Meanwhile, poor husband is wanting to live until he's 90s and is trying to figure out how he's not going to be a financial burden on his children. So those are the kinds of things that unfortunately fear causes. It causes a lot of frustration, it causes a lot of turbulence, and we can definitely do away with it. But we have to, as individuals, as human beings, we have to be willing and able to dig down and to look at what the root causes are so that we can address those and then move forward.
Definitely. So because people are afraid, you did hit on one point that I want to dive into a little bit, which is that almost like not analysis paralysis, but it's almost that fear paralysis where people are afraid because they're thinking of what other people are thinking. And what would be the best strategies to kind of get somebody beyond that fear? Is it more so the expectation side of the house, or what would be some of the things like right now that somebody can go through?
So one of the things that is a huge contributor to fear is when we listen to people that are actually, I just did another podcast a couple of days ago on the whole idea of the naysayers, or as those individuals used to call them, they said the referees, right? It's the individuals that are sitting on the sidelines that absolutely love to bless us. And this happens to everybody, by the way. I'm sure you know it. It happens to me too. It does happen to everyone, where they just want to bless you with all the wisdom and the knowledge and whatever it is that they have. But the funny thing is that as well-intentioned as those individuals might be, their guidance oftentimes comes when your fear is the strongest, or when you're at the point where you're ready to get beyond the fear and they're holding you back because either they're too afraid for you to not get hurt, or they don't want you, not because they're bad and ill spirited or ill meaning, but there's just that human thing of, of being just constantly being in competition. They don't want you to see you more successful than they are. And so when that happens, now let's say that you're in that situation and you're finally at the point where you're saying, yep, I'm afraid. Yep, I need to talk to someone about my taxes. Yes, I need to have my financial team talking, because financial teams aren't talking, even for individuals that do have all of the financial players in alignment. They're not talking. But then you'll have someone, whether it be a family member or somebody, saying, are you crazy? That nobody does that. Like, who heard of your financial team talking? Well, guess what? It's not something that's out there because those individuals aren't incentivized to be talking. But what if I told you that those individuals talking could significantly reduce the money that, going back to our prior podcast, that you're living on the table? So now what are you going to do? You're grappling with the fear of, what should I be doing? Versus listening to that person telling you, no, it's not really being done. And so my guidance to individuals that are in that situation when they're trying to overcome fear is those people that are blessing you with their knowledge. I'm sure they're well-intentioned, but they've been there for you for all this time. And their knowledge, maybe it did push you forward, maybe it didn't. But especially if it didn't push you forward, put some guardrails around you and find some mentors, find experts that you can rely on. And when you find those experts, similarly to how when you go to the doctor, in order to get the best diagnostic, you have to be in a situation where you're vulnerable, where you do share with the doctor what your pains and ailments and whatever it is that you're dealing with. It's the same thing with an expert. If you go to the tax person and you kind of look at the tiles on the ceiling and you expect that answers are going to fall down, guess what? Your taxes are only going to be as good as that happens, right? But if you're willing to have a detailed conversation around what you're trying to achieve and how you're trying to go about it and what are the different ways in which you can minimize taxes, guess what? The answers will be in front of you, but the answers will not come until you're willing to ask the tough questions.
Which brings us to Which brings us to the lovely book, The Art of Asking.
There you go.
Yeah, it's not sponsored by that book, by the way. But The Art of Asking, the reason why I bring that book up is because, when it comes to fear, and it's almost like people are afraid to ask, one, or they feel as though they don't want to seem ignorant in asking. But the part of asking is to show to not be ignorant anymore because you're asking the question to get more knowledge. And I think that because a lot of us feel ignorant around finances, which we most of us are, and we are constantly learning because everybody does something different and for that particular situation. So asking cannot hurt anybody but yourself for not asking. And I think that's one of the things that we have to kind of go as those of you who are listening right now, like these are the things that really would change your lifestyle by just taking the time out to ask that right question. So when it comes to asking the right question, does it depend on who they ask, or can it just be just some random
It
person?
definitely, I'm sure you know the answer to that one, to that question. It definitely matters who you ask. And this is again where I'm going to use my analogy with my doctor analogy. I grew up with all of my parents' friends were doctors and nurse practitioners and dentists and pharmacists. So there are a lot of doctor analogies. But similarly to, let's say that you've got a you let's say that you've got a foot problem, right? And you've been seeing a podiatrist for a really long time, and all of a sudden you develop some sort of a chest pain, and the doctor will tell you, well, again, you've seen this doctor for a long time, you trusted him or her implicitly, and you say, I've got this problem, and doctor says, well, I don't think it's anything major, you should just maybe take some aspirin, but the problem continues. At that point in time, are you going to continue to ask the same doctor who's a podiatrist about your potential heart problem? You might, but you probably shouldn't. It's the same thing, for example, when with individuals, I'll use a parallel in the financial industry, with individuals that will go to a CPA and say, where should I invest my money? Or individuals that will go to a financial advisor to say, how do I optimize my taxes? Or to go to someone to say, or to go to a friend, a neighbor to say, how should I invest my money, right? It's very similar. Whether you go to the CPA or you go to the neighbor, they both might have, the knowledge or some desire to learn about investments in common, but are they the right person to ask? Probably not. So my philosophy when it comes to questions is that there are no such things as stupid questions, unless they're really stupid. What do I mean by that? Think about the question that you're about to ask, and if in your mind it makes perfect sense, ask it. But if in your mind you're thinking, yeah, no, this is then it probably is going to be that, because that's you're embodying the feelings that are coming through even your question. But if you're genuine, even if your question is super basic, it's a wonderful question because it's top of mind to you. And the answer to that question, guess what? You will be surprised to find that it's going to lead to what? To another question. Yep. And then another question. And through those questions, just like we were talking earlier, through those questions is how you get to the right responses. But if you're afraid to ask that first or that second question for the fear of banishment or maybe the fear of sounding stupid, who cares? Even if you do sound stupid. At the end of the day, this is about you, your personal situation, your money. Ask the question, because if you don't ask it now for the fear of being judged by others, when you start judging yourself for the lack of for not taking action when you should have, trust me, it feels much, much worse than any judgment that somebody else could put on you, and you could care less because you really shouldn't care about it anyway.
Right. Well, you just dropped the mic on that one. That was awesome, because you hear a lot of people that say, I actually had this question to me, I think within all this week, actually, every day, somebody different have asked me, well, I am making a little bit more. What should I do with this money? And they was like, what do I invest in? And I always tell them, well, it really depends on your lifestyle. What is your exit strategy? Have that exit mindset in mind. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but it's because they ask the question, but it's also, well, what is it you're going to use it for? And a lot of people don't think of that next question. And then also, how soon do they plan on getting it back? And if they can actually lose it, if this really is extra money. And so, with that fear of the unknown, a lot of people are willing to go to the person that they know first. And usually it's not a CPA, it's not a financial advisor. It's usually their friend or me, myself, because they listen to me on the podcast. But it's almost feel like they know me. But
Right, exactly. Well, now they know me
yeah.
too, so they can
Yes.
we can help them together. But here's what I will tell you, Anthony, on that note. My philosophy, all too often people ask the question, and they ask it not because it's a stupid question, it's because they don't know. It's not even ignorance, it's they don't know. It's all that we're being pre-programmed to ask. Where should I, especially now with everything that's happening with the market, with cryptocurrencies, where should I invest the money? It's a very popular question that's everywhere. The challenge that I would have to people, instead of asking the question of where should I invest my money, would be to ask, what is it that I'm not thinking of? Because one of the things that we do, for example, with our methodology is we start by focusing on what is the client really trying to achieve.
Yep.
Because if we start talking about, about even, when do you need the money back? That's wonderful. But then we have to automatically look at the rate of return and hope that we're going to get it during the amount of time that we've allotted aside. And then if we don't get it, we're going to be very disappointed. Mm-hmm. But if we were to flip the tables and say, okay, what is it that we need this money to do for us? How is it going to service us? How do we need this money to work towards our benefit? How do we want it taxed? Taxes is a huge thing. Taxes is not just about the taxes that you pay today, it's about the taxes that you pay down the road. And if you maximize or optimize the taxes that you pay this year, you're probably in most cases shooting yourself in the foot down the road. Or if you're optimizing your taxes in the future, there's a chance that you're leaving money on the table for the current year, right? And so it's really a much deeper question. And so my guidance to any of the individuals that are asking a question, where should I invest my money, is dig a little deeper, and dig a little deeper within your own soul. Because you hit the nail on the head, Anthony. What happens if you lose it? Are you going to be able to stand it? This is not just about what is your risk profile. This is about a very core question. If you were to lose 50% of that money, would you be okay? And if the answer is no, then stop telling me, please, that you're in your 30s or early 40s and you can assume all the risk in the world, because evidently you can't.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of stuff that people are just not aware, and they don't know that those questions can be and should be asked, because it's not what the media talks about every single day. We're not being incentivized to ask the right questions.
Yeah. Is that something that we kind of got ingrained from grade school, you think?
I think just thinking back to my own personal financial education, that there is no financial education in grade school, in high school. Of course, in college, I got a finance degree. So it was a little bit different. But here's the deal, even with a finance degree, unless you go down the path of how do I invest money, like my own money, even when you get a finance degree, the whole idea isn't focused on what you should be doing as an individual to optimize your long-term trajectory. The whole focus is from a schooling perspective on how to turn you into the best employee possible. It's a very, very different dynamic. So that being said, if that's what happens, at a university level, forget about high school or grade school to begin with, unless you went to a private school where the whole focus was on teaching you how to budget and how to run school projects, and you had businesses at your school. Yes, those schools do exist. If you went to one of those schools, then you're probably much further ahead than everybody else. That still doesn't mean that you've got everything optimized. It just means that you've got a leg up on the traditional educational system. But no, I don't think that any of this was taught. Should we have been? Absolutely should be ingrained in school, because if it would be, I feel that our children would be in so much better position, just for the knowledge alone.
Yeah, because I'm thinking of the point of the reason why I was thinking of grade school is because we are constantly judged by our peers and heavily so, definitely during the middle school, high school era. And as we get older, we still kind of hang out with some of those friends and some of the people that were doing that program. Now, when it comes to the fear of being wrong or doing things wrongly, we try to do those in house. And I'm just trying to think of so much is happening with people's lives right now. I mean, we have the pandemic, we have uh, another variant coming around, we have our families to worry about. Some people are fear of losing their jobs. Now, when it comes to the fear of actually looking at their finances in the first place, um, what I'm just trying to think of. Are there anything from your perspective, well, actually from your life, are you afraid of anything financially?
Here's what I will tell you. I used to be. I used to be, and where I'm at right now, yes, there is a lot going on in the world. There is a lot going on in our country at a global level, and there is a lot of fear that, frankly, I think we could all partake in. But I think if you have the right strategy in place, and if your money, if you know that you've done the absolute best that you could without a shadow of a doubt, then you should have no fear. Because at the end of the day, everything that's happening is truly outside of our control. What we do have control over is what it is that we do, the choices that we make. I'll go here, I'll use an example of the husband and wife couple that I was telling you about earlier. When I spoke with her on one of our prior sessions, she said something to me that was very just out of nowhere. I said, okay, so thinking about what we're going to do, we were thinking through a strategy. We had gone through the goals. We were thinking through the strategy before we even got to products, right? What is it that we envision in the next 5 to 7 years? And her response just shook me to my core. She said, well, in the next 5 years, the whole world there's going to be a global war. And it doesn't matter what we do with our money today, we're going to be doomed anyway. So I said, and I paused and I thought, well, that's wonderful. Great way to go to sleep at night, right? But beyond that, if we were to think about it, if we do nothing, there are a lot of things that we can do to minimize the impact of inflation, to minimize the impact of surging taxes, to minimize what may happen in the future. Do we have a crystal ball? No. If we did, a lot of people would be making a lot of money off of that, right? But what we do have at our disposal is our will and our willingness and our ability to make changes in such a way that they will serve us regardless of what happens. Again, we can control what we can't control, but if we do things to the point where we know that we've exhausted all of our options and that we are optimized to the best of our abilities, then no, it should be fine. But if we don't, yes, the fear will be there. And yes, I did have fears myself before I knew that, okay, I did the very best that I could with all the different pots of money, right? Making sure that they're optimized. But once I overcame that, it was a beautiful world. I didn't have to worry about it anymore.
So I guess now the next question is, how did you overcome it?
So I overcame, and I shared with you a little bit in our last episode. It was really kind of looking at my own situation first and asking the questions. Always ask questions. Yep. Asking the question of what are we missing out on? What were we missing out on when we spoke with all those so-called financial experts? What was it that they weren't telling me? Mm-hmm. Because I knew that it was all about the money that I had in their minds, the investable assets, right? But they weren't looking at my real estate portfolio. They weren't looking at other things that we were owning. And they weren't looking at our overall net worth. We were also young. And so when I started looking, I started asking the question once again of what were we missing out on? What weren't we told? And then more importantly, in addition to what weren't we told, is why weren't we told? Because when we found out what we weren't told, the question then the question to the question, then we said, okay, why wouldn't they have told us that? And the answer was not because, again, they were ill incentivized or ill meaning. They didn't know. or the companies they were working for did not have access to those types of products or financial vehicles or leveraged investments that we needed that would have helped us out. And so I kept asking questions. And then the other big thing was, what is it that clients are not getting when they're working with their financial team? Because the answers that started becoming very prevalent is that is not just about where you invest your money. It's not just about how you're dealing with taxes for the today or the tomorrow. It's the combination. From a legal perspective, it's, how do you have a conversation with your attorney to make sure that your taxes are optimized just because of how your business is set up, and vice versa, right? And so it was really by asking all of those questions and then figuring out more and more, how do we refine our approach? And that's exactly how our methodology came to be. Our methodology is literally baked and it's taking into account all of the ahas and all of the lessons learned, not just from my own case, but from working with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of families and small businesses, specifically on optimizing what it is that we need to do when it comes to our money, so we can stop leaving it on the table.
Right. I'll definitely have to make sure we put a link back to that one, because we had such a great time. So I think we really dove straight in for the different strategies, because when it comes to fear, everybody, is what are you actually asking the question for? Like, why are you asking the question in the first place? Where do you really want to see your finances? Where do you want to take, I guess you could say, where do you really, what is the whole purpose of everything that you're doing when you're thinking about the fear? Why are you afraid? Is the question that you need to ask yourself. Why are you running away from something when all it has to do is just ask the question? Open up a book, read a book. There's so many resources. You can use this podcast. You can use Eunicia, her whole company is there willing to help you out, because there's too much out here for you for you to be afraid financially. All you have to do is just try it with $100, try it with $1,000, whatever you have that's available, and just try it. Because once you get comfortable, you start to run with it. Now you start putting in 5,000. Next thing you know, you're doing 10,000, 100,000. Think about like when a baby's walking. They are so afraid to fall, but they'll fall and get right back up until they start walking. The next thing you know, they're running. You can't catch them. They were there for 1 second. Now they over here. Be the baby again. Just start, become fearless again with your finances. Not reckless, but fearless. So as we go to the third segment, what does your business, how can I put it? Where do you see yourself going in the next 5 years with your business?
Well, the future is exceptionally bright in the next 5 years. The last 5 years, we've uncovered a lot of huge opportunities. And more importantly, we've really learned who it is that our clients are. More importantly, who are the clients that will get the most value out of working with us. Because like you said earlier, Anthony, when it comes to regardless of where individuals are finding themselves, if you're finding yourself in a situation where you don't have sufficient resources to carry you, say for minimum 3 to 6 months, then you should focus on that. If you're in a situation where those resources are already there, congratulations. You're in a position where you can now take it to the next level. If you're in a position where you can inch in a little bit more every single month, wonderful. But similarly to how individuals are constantly trying to identify what is the next level when it comes to how they approach money, similarly to us, in the next 5 years, we're going to be in a situation where we're going to continue to help hundreds and hundreds of families and small businesses per year, but we're going to be in a position where very strategically, we're going to work with more and more business owners and successful executives that are already above $1 million. The reason I say that is because we have a lot of clients that fit the profile that we're working with right now, and it just pains me. We have a client right now where we're desperately, right before the end of the year, is a brand new client. We're trying to figure out how to minimize close to $500,000 in taxes. I mean, when you're even just thinking about those numbers, they're huge, and they don't know where to turn because that support is not readily available. And kind of talking about fear, you don't truly know who to trust because it's the sum of large numbers, and people are even more afraid when the numbers are so big. And so that's where I see us being in the next 5 years. But in addition to that, we will not leave the individual families behind that are needing the help and that are willing and able to step outside of the box and embrace the changes that they can embrace in order to see the sunshine on the other side of their biggest fears.
Nice. Well, speaking of helping people hide money, legally hide money, my doctor, who was nice enough to share his financials with me a little bit, was saying that he had to pay $17,000 in his housing, and he was asking me how could he actually hide $17,000 with his finances, and he said he's already maxing out his 401k and his retirement accounts and so forth, but also his wife just started a business. I know he didn't ask me directly to ask you, but if you don't mind taking it on for the little information that he provided me, what will be some small strategies that he could try to do to hide 17,000?
Well, the whole idea, I won't call it hiding, I will call it optimizing, because at the end of the day, we do have to, when it comes to taxes, we have to pay our fair share. I'm not a proponent in any way of please try to cheat the government. Not at all. We live in this amazing country where, frankly, if it wasn't for individuals paying their taxes, we would not be able to have individuals that need the support would not be able to have access to the support that they need. But what I would tell you is, in terms of optimizing his taxes, one of the biggest things that he needs to do, anybody needs to do, is to have an open conversation with their CPA and or their tax professional, and just ask the question of, what am I missing? Like, okay, we've got, I don't know if he's getting paid W-2 or if he has his own practice, his wife has a company. Have they had the conversation with their tax professional to say, hey, this is our situation. This is how this year is different than last. What can we do to optimize? This is how we're set up as a business. What else can we do to optimize there? Because even just the way that the business is set up can make a huge world of difference when it comes to how much we pay in taxes. And so those are the couple of things that I would say are imperative. Of course, I'm always willing to make sure that one of our team members has a conversation if he wants to chat, or anybody else is in that situation, to take a look into more detail. What are some of the parameters that could be taken advantage of? Because it is beginning of December, but the end of December is going to be here very quickly. And after December 31st, there's not much more that we can do as far as 2021 is concerned. But that tax planning component is something that is all too often overlooked. And it's overlooked not because, again, the tax individuals maybe don't want to do it. It's just not part of how they run business. It's not part of what most clients ask. And because they don't ask and they don't want that information, then what ends up happening is we show up in January through April somewhere on an individual basis. We do our taxes, and whatever we did, and we live with the aftermath. But in my perspective, it's all about the planning. The more we plan ahead, the better off we are.
Well, I can't end that on a perfect note. Because that is the whole cusp of fear, the lack of planning, just to kind of get those emotions out the way.
Very much so. Very much so. It's just, we just gotta embrace it and face it, not allowing it to have us and hold us down as fear. But, look at it. One of Dean Graziosi, whom I love, he just has a lot of just golden nuggets. One of the big things that he always says is, your biggest breakthroughs are on the other side of your biggest fears. So if you let that really sink for a moment, is biggest breakthroughs, biggest fears. But we don't get to those big breakthroughs on whatever it is that we do in life, finances included, if we don't actually get past those big fears.
Perfect. So you ready to dive into the final 4 questions?
Let's do it.
All righty. These are slightly different than the last ones. So number 1, what does wealth mean to you?
Wealth to me means being in a situation where nobody tells me what to do, how to run my business, how to show up for work, how to treat my kids, what school they go to, what kind of lifestyle I lead. It's wealth to me is the freedom to live the life that I feel is purposeful to me, whether it's on a high note or on a low note. It feels right to me. That's where wealth is. It's more than just money. It's a state of being. It's a state of being content and being happy with where you're at and what you've accomplished. But never, of course, never taking the foot off the pedal. There's always more that we can do. And the more we strive for better, the better human beings I feel we become.
Such a big heart. Number 2, what was your worst money mistake?
One of the worst money mistakes that I've made was allowing the fear to grab on me. It goes back to the financial experts that I talked to the individuals that always told me, go back and look at some roster of investments that your company will allow you or not allow you to invest in, or you can or cannot invest in based on the rules and the regulations of the industry. I worked for companies in my prior life, big name brands, that are in public accounting, and for those companies, it was always there were always these databases that you had to go in to figure out, can I invest in this company, can I not? And the financial experts that were so quote unquote willing to help me would always end up sending me back to this database. And when you're working 80 to 100 hours climbing up the corporate ladder and doing a great job at that, it's kind of hard to do a really good job on your own finances too. And so because of that, I didn't really invest much early on in my career. I was afraid of my own shadow, because I was always pushed back to do the homework, quote unquote. And because of that, when I started really asking the tough questions, I started asking the questions because I felt I was in a position of having missed the ball, having missed opportunities. And so that's my biggest regret, is not asking big questions earlier on, and being bold and just being willing to go through the fear. If I could redo it all over again, that's probably where I would start.
Nice. What is the book that you're reading or looking forward to read?
Right now, it's actually I can't remember the exact name of the book, but it talks about the pitfalls of retirement planning. I always love to hear different perspectives from other experts. And going into the new year, one of the books that I'm looking forward to reading is I believe it's the 3-month year or the 12-week year.
Okay.
It's a book that's basically focused on how do you set up goals in such a way that they're meaningful and they're not outstretching for too long. Because if you do that, and the goals are a lot more attainable, then you can achieve basically 4 to multiple times more in the same year, just by truncating them and being super strategic and super focused.
Well, I can't wait to hear your thoughts on that one. Sounds really good.
Yep.
What is your favorite dish to make? I had to keep that one in there.
I'm not a very big cook. I don't spend much time in the kitchen. My favorite dish to eat is really anything that has eggs. I love eggs. I would say polenta. I love making polenta with lots of different types of cheeses. I probably make a pretty mean European polenta with all sorts of cheeses and with bacon bits.
Ooh, okay.
It really is delicious.
All right. So the very last question, which is not part of the final four, is where can people find out more about you?
They can find more about me on just any of the social media channels. Of course, we welcome individuals to visit us on at www.empoweredfinancialplanner.com. We have a lot of resources there. One of them, if you want to get access to the five biggest pitfalls that cost individuals when it comes to retirement income, you can also visit empoweredfinancialplanner.com/pitfalls. Do me a favor when you go there, make sure that you let us know, send us an email or put it in comments that that you heard about it here on the podcast, and would love to make sure that we rope you back in with Anthony so that he knows that the voice that he puts out there is resonating.
Awesome. And yeah, please make sure you put down, where you heard it. You heard it here first, folks. All right. Well, thank you so much, Eunicia, for being on the show. I'm sure everybody has have gotten some quality information from you, and I've definitely enjoyed your time. So thank you so much.
It was my pleasure. Always here to add value. And I hope that our listeners, hopefully those that are listening to this before December 31st, at a minimum, get a chance to talk to someone about figuring out where they can keep a little bit more money on the table, at least a little bit more for 2021, and of course, going into 2022.
All right. Thank you so much. All right, everybody. Y'all be safe. I'm out.